Every name means something in New York, especially when it starts disappearing from a door. Let's begin.
Chapter 1. The door that forgot its own name, Riddle Street, has a way of making you respect small things, not because they are noble, but because they are efficient. A gun announces itself. A knife leaves opinions, but a brass nameplate, unscrewed cleanly and returned on schedule, is the sort of mischief that wears gloves and owns a watch. It was a Friday afternoon with the kind of grey light New York uses to flatten faces and sharpen motives. Wolfe had finished his orchid hour upstairs, endured lunch with the solemnity he reserves for anything Fritz makes, and now sat behind his desk with a book open and his mind half closed. I was at my own desk, sharpening pencils the way a man sharpens patience, when the bell rang. Fritz was in the kitchen. Wolfe did not stir. The bell in our house is my job. The visitor was a physician. You could tell by his posture, the neatness of his clothing, and the way his eyes looked past me, as if checking for symptoms. He was tall, spare, in his late 40s, with greying hair that had been disciplined into place. His overcoat was good, his shoes were clean, and his hands were those of a man who does not work with heavy objects. His face carried a controlled discomfort, not pain, but the kind of irritation that comes from being asked to explain something foolish to people who insist the world has rules. "Mr. Goodwin," he said. "Dr. Harlan Pritt." "You're on time," I told him, "because that is always worth noting. Come in, try not to cure anyone while you're here. Wolfe charges extra for miracles." He blinked, not amused, and followed me into the office. Wolfe looked up long enough to register the visitor, and then returned his gaze to the page. Wolfe believes human beings are most tolerable when silent. "Mr. Wolfe," I said. Wolfe grunted, which in his language meant he acknowledged we still lived in the same building. I gestured to the red leather chair. Dr. Pritt sat with care, as if the chair might be contagious. He folded his hands once, unfolded them, folded them again. His eyes were precise. He had the look of a man who has told families hard truths and expects truth in return. Wolfe turned a page. Then he set the book down with deliberate slowness, as if the act were charity. "Doctor," Wolfe said, "you have come to a private investigator. You are not seeking medical advice. Therefore, either you have been threatened or you have been annoyed." "Which?" Pritt's jaw tightened. "Annoyed and concerned." "That is acceptable," Wolfe said. "Proceed." Pritt drew a breath. "My office is on East 72nd Street. I have a brass nameplate on the door, screwed in place. It has been there for years. Every weekend, it vanishes." I waited for him to finish. He did, and the silence that followed was so clean you could have wrapped china in it. I said, "Vanishes like stolen." "Yes," he replied, stiff. "Gone when I arrive Monday morning. It returns before the first patient. By the time my receptionist unlocks at 8:30, it is back in place." Wolfe's eyes lifted. Interested now, the way he becomes interested when something behaves too neatly. "Every weekend." "Every weekend," Pritt repeated. 3 months, 12 occurrences." "You have not replaced it," Wolfe said. "I did once," Pritt admitted. "A new plate, same engraving. The new plate vanished too. Then the original returned." Wolfe's eyelids lowered slightly. "So the thief prefers the original, or wants me to think so," Pritt said. That was not a foolish answer. It suggested the doctor's irritation had been fermenting into suspicion, which is what New York does to sensible men. I asked. "No broken screws?" "No," Pritt said. "The screws are removed cleanly. When the plate returns, the same screws are used. There is no damage to the door, no scratch marks. And the building security," I said. Pritt's mouth tightened. "The building has a doorman. There is a night watchman. The hallway has a camera." Wolfe's eyebrows rose a fraction. "Then you have evidence." "I have missing footage," Pritt said, and now the irritation in his voice turned darker. "The camera shows the hallway, Monday through Friday. On weekends the recording fails. Or rather, It fails only for the interval that would be useful. Wolfe held his gaze on Pritt's face, as if weighing his choice of words. That is not a prank. That is arrangement. Yes, Pritt said. It is. I am a physician, Mr. Wolfe. I do not deal in arrangements. I deal in bodies that obey biology. This does not obey biology. It obeys someone. Wolfe's fingers interlaced on the desk. Why would anyone steal a nameplate? Pritt's shoulders rose slightly. That is what I want to know. Wolfe's eyes moved to me. Archie. I leaned forward. Doctor, I'll ask you the rude question. Do you have enemies? Pritt's expression stiffened. Everyone has enemies. Sure, I said. But do you have any with a weekend schedule and a fondness for brass? Pritt hesitated. I am discreet, Wolfe said. Discreet men have the most interesting troubles. Pritt's eyes flashed with something like offense, then settled. I am not accused of misconduct, if that is what you are fishing for. No, Wolfe said. I am fishing for motive. A thief with motive is predictable. A thief without motive is merely a fool, and fools are tedious. Pritt leaned forward slightly. My practice is private. I treat some people who value privacy. They do not want their names associated with mine. But my nameplate is on my door. It is also on the directory downstairs. Wolfe's voice remained calm. So the nameplate's removal does not erase you. It announces itself. Yes, Pritt said. That is why I am here. It is not concealment. It is signaling. I nodded, like saying, I can touch your identity whenever I want. Pritt's eyes narrowed. Exactly. Wolfe sat back, and for a moment I could tell he was listening not to Pritt's words, but to the rhythm behind them. Wolfe listens the way a man hears a clock ticking from inside a wall. Not the sound itself, but what it implies. When does it vanish? Wolfe asked. I do not know, Pritt replied. It is present Friday evening when I leave. It is absent Monday morning when I arrive. It is back by 8:30. And you have checked Saturday, I said. Yes, Pritt said. I came in Saturday afternoon. Once the plate was gone. I came Sunday morning the next time. Gone. I came Sunday evening. Still gone. So it returns early Monday, I said. Apparently, Pritt replied. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. Your receptionist. Pritt blinked. What? Who has a key to your office? Wolfe asked. Pritt's mouth tightened. I do, my receptionist. Miss Kroll has a key. The building super has a master key. And the doorman, I said. The doorman has access to the hall, Pritt replied. Not my office. Wolfe nodded slightly. The nameplate is on the hall side of the door. Yes, Pritt said. So the thief does not need a key to your office, Wolfe said. Only access to the hallway. Which is controlled, Pritt insisted. It is not open to the public. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Controlled is a word used by men who wish to believe. I cleared my throat. Doctor is your nameplate special. A symbol, a professional pride thing. Pritt's eyes flicked. It was my father's. He was a physician too. He had it made when he opened his practice. I took it when I took his office. Wolfe's gaze held. So it is not merely your name, it is lineage. Pritt's jaw tightened. Yes. Wolfe looked at the desk blotter as if the blotter had just whispered a fact. A name is a key, Wolfe said, and keys do not walk off by accident. I watched Pritt's face. That line hit him. It made his irritation become fear. Mr. Wolfe, he said quietly, are you suggesting someone is trying to take my practice? Wolfe's eyes lifted. I am suggesting someone is attempting to alter a reality. Removing your nameplate does not take your practice. It creates uncertainty. Patients approach a door and see no name. They hesitate. They doubt. Doubt is the beginning of loss. Pritt swallowed. But it comes back. Yes, Wolfe said. That is the cunning part. It implies the thief can remove it and restore it at will. It is an assertion of control, not a permanent theft. I added. And it happens on weekends, when patients aren't there to notice, which means the message isn't for them, it's for you. Pritt's eyes narrowed. Who would do that? Wolfe's face stayed composed. We will find out. Archie will go to your building. He will observe. He will count the footsteps and taste the air for lies, I said. That last part is poetic. I mostly just look at people until they sweat. Wolfe ignored that. Doctor, you will provide me with the names of your doorman, your night watchman, your superintendent, and your receptionist. You will also provide the names of any physicians in your building, any neighbors who share your hall, and any person who has expressed interest in your office, your patients, or your father's practice. Pritt exhaled. I can do that. And Wolfe added, You will not confront anyone. You will not replace the plate again. You will not add locks, cameras, or alarms. You will allow the pattern to continue. Pritt's eyes widened. Allow it. Yes, Wolfe said. Patterns are useful. Interference destroys them. Pritt hesitated, then nodded. All right. Fee, Wolfe said. Pritt did not flinch at the number. He had the look of a man who had already priced this trouble in sleep. When he left, I closed the door and went back to my desk. Wolfe sat with his eyes half-lidded, already arranging the facts. I said, So what's the play? Stakeout in a medical building on a weekend. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Not a stakeout, an audit. Of what? I asked. Of access, Wolfe said. Someone reaches your doctor's door without forcing anything. Someone knows the camera fails on schedule. Someone removes brass and returns it before Monday's first patient. That suggests belonging. Belonging, I repeated, like an insider. Yes, Wolfe said, or someone who has purchased the privilege of invisibility. I leaned back. A missing nameplate is a strange hobby. It is not a hobby, Wolfe replied. It is a message. We must determine to whom it is addressed and what it demands. I looked at the window, at the street beyond where people hurried with umbrellas and intentions. On Riddle Street, I said. Names buy you a lot, doors too. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. And when a door forgets its own name, Archie, it is because someone wishes it to remember a different one. That was enough to sour my afternoon, which in our line of work counts as progress.
After dark, a quiet corridor can tell you more than a crowded room in daylight. Let's dive in.
Chapter 2. The corridor after dark, a building corridor at night, is supposed to be a neutral thing, like a hallway in a courthouse or a sermon in a church. It exists to get you from one door to another and to remind you that you are not alone, because other doors mean other lives, other noise, other secrets. But this corridor had a way of feeling watched even when it was empty. And if you spend enough time around Wolfe, you learn to respect places that pretend they have no opinions. It was the second evening after Dr. Harlan Pritt sat in Wolfe's office and described his missing brass nameplate as if it were a symptom nobody else would diagnose. Wolfe had remained in the brownstone, as he always does when legs are required. I was the legs. Wolfe was the head, the stomach, and the opinion. He had told me, with his usual lack of charm, go to the building, find the door, the building, the corridor outside Dr. Pritt's office, the place where someone could move after sundown without carrying a key in their hand because they carried belonging in their posture. So I went after closing, when stores shut their smiles and keep their worries on the premises. The medical building was different at night. The main doors were locked. The lobby directory was still lit, and the brass listings looked more official than honest. Inside, the air smelled of floor wax, disinfectant, and radiator heat. The noise of patients was gone, replaced by distant cleaning carts and the soft mechanical hum of elevators running without purpose. The doorman let me in with the careful reluctance of a man who had been instructed to cooperate, but had not been instructed to like it. He gave me a visitor badge and a warning with his eyes. I rode the elevator to Dr. Pritt's floor alone. When the doors opened, the corridor greeted me with its carpeted hush and its row of professional doors. Dr. Pritt's office sat at the end, the door closed, its brass plate absent as promised. Under the ceiling lights, the corridor looked innocent, like a well-behaved sentence. I walked it slowly, listening to my shoes and to nothing else. That was the point. Silence tells you who belongs. Silence tells you who does not. A janitor's cart sat near the fire door, stocked with rags, spray bottles, and the kind of chemical optimism that keeps a city presentable. A man stood beside it, leaning slightly as if the cart were a friend. He was in his 60s, with a narrow face, thin grey hair, and the tired eyes of someone who spends his life cleaning other people's messes, while pretending he does not know what they are. He watched me approach with suspicion that had learned politeness. "You lost," he said. "Not yet," I replied. "Gus Meller." He blinked, surprised. "Who told you my name?" "I have a talent," I said. "Also your badge is the size of a menu." He glanced down at it, then back up, face tightening. "What do you want?" "I want the truth," I said. "And I know that's a lot to ask a man holding a mop." His mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "Truth gets you in trouble." "Sometimes," I agreed. "But lies get you in worse trouble, and they don't even come with overtime." He shifted his weight, up close. He had the face of a man who feared trouble more than he feared truth. That is the kind of face that has seen what happens when you notice too much. I said, "You work this floor after sundown, and you've seen Dr. Pritt's plate come and go." "Every night," he replied. "How quiet is it?" I asked. He snorted softly. "Dead quiet. After 6, nobody up here but management if they're late, and security if they're bored. 10 o'clock, you can hear your own thoughts, and that's the worst noise." "No tenants wandering," I said. "No strangers." He shook his head. "No reason. This ain't apartments. This is Suits and Secrets. Folks don't stroll for fun." "That's what I like about it," I said. "It makes strolling noticeable." Gus's eyes narrowed. "You asking because of Dr. Pritt?" "I'm asking because of Dr. Pritt's door," I corrected. "A brass plate that vanishes every weekend and returns before Monday's first patient. That means somebody has time in this corridor." Gus's jaw tightened. "I don't go in there." "I didn't say you did," I said. "I'm checking the corridor. The hinges, the locks, the routine." He glanced toward Dr. Pritt's office as if the brass nameplate might bite him. "Routine is routine. I clean. I empty trash. I wipe fingerprints so people can pretend they don't leave any." "Good," I said. "Tell me the cleanup routine." He sighed, resigned. "I start at the far end, work down conference room, break nook, then the suites. I don't go into offices unless I got a work order. Mostly I do the corridor, the common rooms, the restrooms. Trash comes out at 10:30 down the service elevator. Then I do a second pass and lock up the supply closet." "Work orders," I said. "Who issues them?" "Night supervisor," he replied. "Sometimes an assistant. If it's urgent, an yon issue a work order for Dr. Pritt's office recently?" I asked. His eyes flicked away. There it was, the small evasive move that says a man has already answered himself. I kept my voice mild. "Gus," he swallowed. "There was talk about an inventory check, perfumery display upstairs, some special thing." "Not on this floor," I said. He shook his head. "Not supposed to be, but I saw folks up here late, moving quick, like they didn't want to be seen." "Who?" I asked. He hesitated. "I don't know names. I know faces." "That's fine," I said. "Describe." "One was big," Gus said, raising a hand about shoulder height. "Squaw, like security. Another was a woman. Slim clipboard type, moves like she owns the hallway." I made a note, square like security, clipboard type. If Wolfe had been there, he would have grunted and said, "Proceed." I did. "Locks," I said. "Who locks Dr. Pritt's office at night?" "Security," Gus replied. "They check, they pull the handle, they walk on." "Hinges squeak?" I asked. "No," Gus said. "Good hinges. They keep this place quiet. Quiet costs money." I walked to Dr. Pritt's office and examined the hinge line, the strike plate, the knob. No scratches, no pry marks, nothing that suggested force. Which meant the intruder did not break in. They belonged, or they had help. I turned back to Gus. "Weekend routine," I said. "Who is here late enough to touch that door?" cleaning crew, night watchman. Sometimes the super, he replied. And once in a while Miss Kroll if Dr. Pritt wants something set for Monday. Miss Kroll, I repeated. Dr. Pritt's receptionist. She has a key, Gus said. Sometimes she comes up Sunday night to put things in order. And you never stop her, I said. He gave me a flat look. You ever want to keep your job, you don't look. That's honest, I said. His face tightened. Honest gets you fired. Not here, I said. Not with me. With me you only get questioned. He did not look reassured. I said, Gus, after sundown you say it's dead quiet. It is, he insisted. Then how do people move without you noticing? I asked. He frowned. I would notice. I let that sit for a moment, then said, unless you don't notice them because you're used to them. His eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. I notice everybody. Not everybody, I said. You notice strangers. You don't notice the corridor's own furniture, security assistants, the people who belong. Gus's mouth tightened. If it's someone who belongs, what am I supposed to do? Nothing, I said. That's the problem. I left him with his cart and his fear and went back to the brownstone with the smell of floor wax in my coat. Wolfe was in his office, naturally, with a book open and his face composed into calm disdain. He listened while I reported. Dead, quiet corridor, no forced entry, routine cleaning, late movement, big man-like security, slim woman with clipboard posture, trash route, shredding handled by management and accounting. Wolfe's eyes narrowed slightly, the sign that my words had landed where he wanted them, he said. If the corridor is empty, then the thief is someone the corridor does not notice. I nodded. Someone who belongs. Wolfe's mouth tightened, or someone made to belong for an hour. By a forged work order, I said. Yes, Wolfe replied. Proceed, Archie. We will make the corridor notice them.
The case stopped being strange and started being murder the moment of X-ray room went cold. Let's step inside.
Chapter 3. The Monday ritual. I spent the weekend camped in the medical building, the way a fisherman camps a stream, patient, cold, and convinced the fish is smarter than the brochure says. I expected a shadow with a screwdriver, a man who moved like guilt and left like smoke. I expected something that looked like theft. What I got looked like maintenance. It was one of those New York weekends when the city pretends to rest but never quite commits. The building was closed, the main floor dark, the windows dressed in their Sunday best for no one, and the only sounds were the building's own. The hum of lights that were not fully asleep, the click of radiators, the distant hiss of traffic, and now and then the soft footfalls of a security man doing his rounds with the enthusiasm of a priest counting candles. Cross had not wanted me there. Kramer had insisted. Wolfe had phrased it as a suggestion that made refusal seem irresponsible. So Cross had given me a visitor badge and a chair in a back office with a view of the corridor outside Dr. Pritt's corridor. He had also given me the kind of look that said he hoped I would get bored and leave. I did not leave. I am paid to be stubborn. The object of my weekend romance was not the office itself. The office was too obvious. It had already been noticed, and now the plate had vanished and returned a dozen times, and everyone with a badge had managed not to see it happen. The object was smaller, quieter, and, according to Wolfe, more likely to be touched by someone who believed nobody was watching. A plate, a brass nameplate on Dr. Pritt's office door, screwed into the hallway side with old care and recent interference. The kind of plate you see every day and never think about. The kind that says a doctor's name and invites everyone else to trust it. I had noticed the mounting screws on my second visit. One screw head had a tiny nick, a bright sliver where the screwdriver had slipped and kissed brass. Not enough to be called damage, enough to be called attention. Wolfe had called it, without seeing it, a likely habit. Observe, he had said. Then return. If the screws are touched, they will confess. So I observed. I watched the corridor all Saturday, breaking only for coffee and the occasional conversation with a bored guard who wanted to know if I was writing a book. Sunday was quieter. The building seemed to sink deeper into itself, like a man sleeping off a decision. Nothing happened that looked like crime. No prowler, no hurried steps, no flashlight beams, no clumsy prying. Late Sunday night, just before midnight, a maintenance man came through with a cart. He wore coveralls the color of dust, carried a tool bag that looked properly heavy, and walked with the calm pace of a man who has keys and expects to use them. He nodded to the guard, exchanged 2 words I could not hear, and rolled his cart down the corridor toward the service panel. I did not move. Moving too soon is how you warn a man you are interested. He stopped at the panel, set down the tool bag, and knelt. He did not glance around nervously. He did not fumble. He worked as if he were tightening a hinge on a door that squeaked. The screwdriver turned slowly, carefully. Not the aggressive twist of a burglar, the practiced turn of a man preserving the same bite. He removed the plate, not yanking it off. Not prying, he lifted it cleanly, set it on the cart, and leaned in toward the opening as if checking a gauge. He stayed there for less than 2 minutes. Then he did something that made my teeth itch with admiration and irritation. He wiped the plate with a cloth, polished it lightly, and put it back. He replaced the screws in the same order, turning them until they seated, then stopping. No over-tightening, no fresh marks. He restored the illusion of untouched metal. Then he stood, rolled his cart away, nodded again to the guard, and disappeared into the service stairwell. The watchman did not blink. The watchman did not follow. He looked relieved, as if someone had done him the favor of performing normal life. I waited 10 minutes, because impatience is what rituals feed on. Then I went to the panel. The screws looked the same at first glance. The nicked head still had its bright sliver. The slots aligned the way they had aligned before. But not exactly. If you stared at screw heads long enough, you could see the difference between untouched and returned. The tiny changes were there. Minute shifts in angle, in the way the slot caught the light, in the faintest alteration of the surrounding paint where the pressure had been redistributed. They had been turned carefully and returned to the same bite. I touched one lightly with my fingertip. It was faintly warm, as if it had been handled recently. The plate itself looked cleaner than the wall around it. It had been polished by confidence. On Monday morning, when the building reopened and the medical corridor filled again with brisk footsteps and hushed voices, that plate sat there like it always had, innocent and obedient. It reappeared as if nothing had ever happened, because the person who handled it had taken pains to ensure nothing looked different. Wolfe would have called it what it was: a ritual, not mischief. Rituals serve a purpose. They are repeated because the result matters, and because the repetition itself creates safety. A man who steals once is a thief. A man who steals the same way every week is a professional, and professionals do not improvise unless forced. I went back to the brownstone with the smell of dust and metal in my head, and the image of that calm maintenance man in my eyes. Wolfe listened, expression still, fingers steepled. When I finished, he said, "You expected a theft." "I expected a shadow with a screwdriver," I said. "I got a man with a cart and manners." Wolfe nodded. "Then the theft is not theft, it is access." "And the plate," I said, "is the point." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Yes, a ritual, performed on Sunday night so that Monday's business will proceed without interruption." I frowned. Monday. Wolfe's voice remained calm. "Monday is when patients return, Archie, and when the name must be back on the door." I thought of the missing footage, the borrowed nameplate, and the quiet weekly ritual, and now this quiet weekly opening of a service panel like a hymn. "Rituals serve a purpose," I said. Wolfe's mouth tightened. "And we will learn whose purpose it is."
Once we took brass plate off the door, it stopped being an object and started being evidence. Let's look closer.
Chapter 4. The X-ray room goes cold. 3 weeks later, on a Monday morning in New York, A superstition wearing a necktie finally turned into murder. People act as if the week is a fresh page, when it is really the same ledger with new ink. The city was bright, sharp, and clean in the way it gets after a cold night. Sunlight on stone, wind off the river, and faces on the sidewalk already busy arranging their excuses. Wolfe was in his office, of course, as immovable as a municipal building. Fritz had served breakfast with the solemnity of a priest, and Wolfe had climbed upstairs for his orchid hour with the devotion of a man who trusts plants more than people. I was at my desk doing what I call work and what Wolfe calls noise. When the phone rang, he answered. The voice on the line was strained in that particular way that says a man is trying to keep control of a situation that has already stepped out of bounds. "Is this Nero Wolfe's residence?" the voice asked. "It is," I said. "If you want to sell religion or vacuum cleaners, you have the wrong address. This is not a sales call. This is Dr. Samuel Keyes of the Midtown Diagnostic Pavilion. We need Mr. Wolfe." I glanced at Wolfe's office door. "He's in," I said. "Whether he will come out depends on whether you've brought a reason worth disturbing him." Dr. Keyes did not laugh. That told me the reason was heavy. A man is dead. One of our physicians, Dr. Harlan Pritt. The name meant plenty. He had sat in our office and asked why his brass name kept vanishing. "I see," I said, police informed. "Yes, but there are complications, and a certain discretion would be appreciated." "Discretion costs extra," I told him. "We will pay," he said quickly. I stood, went to Wolfe's door, and entered without knocking, because when someone says a man is dead, the knock becomes ceremonial. Wolfe sat in his chair behind the desk, reading. He looked up at me with mild annoyance, as if I had interrupted him to announce an unseasonable cloud. "Dr. Samuel Keyes," I said. "Midtown Diagnostic Pavilion. One of their physicians, Dr. Pritt, found dead." Wolfe's eyelids lowered. "Found where?" "In the building's diagnostic suite," I said. Wolfe's eyes sharpened slightly. "Not interest." "Exactly. More like irritation that a new problem had decided it deserved his time." "Call the inspector," he said. "He already called the police," I replied. "I mean Inspector Kramer," Wolfe said. "If a corpse exists, Kramer will arrive. I prefer him informed before he is offended." "I called Kramer," he answered on the second ring, with the voice of a man who had been awake too long and disliked it. "Yeah, morning, Inspector," I said. "Got one for you. Midtown Diagnostic Pavilion. A doctor named Pritt found dead in their X-ray room." There was a pause, and I could picture him reaching for his hat, by instinct. "How do you know?" "Because they called Wolfe," I said. Kramer made a sound that could have been a growl or a prayer. "Of course they did. Stay out of it, Archie." "We're already in it," I said. "He's dead. Where are you?" "At the house." "You stay there," Kramer snapped. I glanced at Wolfe. Wolfe's face was composed into that expression he uses when the police attempt to tell him what to do. I said, "I'll try." Kramer hung up. I looked at Wolfe. "He says stay out of it." Wolfe's mouth tightened. "He says many foolish things." "We will go, I said, because it never hurts to confirm reality. "Yes," Wolfe replied. A dead physician in an X-ray room indicates either incompetence or intention. Both are offensive. Fritz appeared as we were gathering coats, his face calm, but his eyes disapproving. "Mr. Wolfe," he said, "you are leaving." "Yes," Wolfe said. Fritz's gaze moved to me. "And you will return for lunch." "If the city allows me," I said. "The city does not decide," Fritz replied. "I decide." That is Fritz's style of authority. It is quiet, absolute, and usually correct. We took a taxi to Midtown. Wolfe sat rigidly, disliking motion, and I watched the street slide past. The ordinary Monday commerce of bodies and ambitions. The Midtown Diagnostic Pavilion occupied a narrow, well-kept building with glass doors and a lobby that smelled like disinfectant and money. People in sensible shoes moved briskly, wearing expressions that said they were here to be fixed. Dr. Samuel Keyes met us in the lobby. He was middle-aged, clean-shaven, and too tightly composed. His eyes were red at the edges, and his collar sat slightly off, as if he had dressed in a hurry and then tried to pretend he had not. "Mr. Wolfe," he said, extending a hand. Wolfe did not take it. Wolfe rarely takes hands in rooms that smell like disinfectant. "Dr. Keyes, take us to the body." Keyes hesitated. "Inspector Kramer is on his way." "Then we will be efficient before he arrives," Wolfe said. Keyes swallowed and led us down a corridor lined with framed certificates, each one a small flag planted in the ground of credibility. The hallway became quieter, the lighting colder. We passed doors labeled with simple names, all of them designed to sound harmless: ultrasound, lab, consultation. Then Keyes stopped before a door with a brass nameplate. The plate read, "X-ray room A." It was polished. It looked smug, like an alibi that thought it could not be questioned. Keyes unlocked the door with shaking hands. "The lights are off," he said. "We left it as it was." Wolfe stepped inside first, and I followed. The room was dim, lit only by a faint spill from the hall. The X-ray machine loomed in the corner like a large metal insect. There was a table, paper roll on it, and cabinets lining the wall with supplies. The air smelled faintly of ozone and cleaning solution. Dr. Harlan Pritt lay on the floor beside the table, on his side, as if he had simply chosen an inconvenient place to rest. His white coat was askew, one sleeve twisted. His glasses were not on his face. His hair was neat. His expression was almost peaceful, which is always suspicious. The scene was too neat for panic and too quiet for accident. Wolfe stood over the body and looked down with the calm he reserves for puzzles and unpleasant vegetables. He did not bend. He did not touch. He studied the dead man as if reading a note left in a locked drawer. I crouched, because I am paid to use my knees. Pritt's face was pale, no visible blood. His lips were slightly parted. His right hand lay open, fingers relaxed, as if he had released something. I glanced around. The door had no damage. The lights were off. The room felt sealed, not physically but emotionally, as if someone had closed it carefully behind them. Keyes spoke softly. "We found him at 7:30, the first technician in." "Name," Wolfe said. "Janet Hume," Keyes replied. "She's outside with the police." Wolfe's eyes moved to the supply cabinet. "What is missing?" Keyes blinked. "Missing? You said on the phone there were complications," Wolfe replied. "Do not waste my time. What is missing?" Keyes licked his lips. "A vial from the supply cabinet." "What kind of vial?" I asked. Keyes hesitated. Wolfe's voice hardened a fraction. "Doctor, if you omit, you will regret it." Keyes's composure cracked slightly. "A contrast. Agent vial. For imaging, it is controlled." "Controlled," I said. "Meaning it can be abused." Keyes nodded. "Tight." I stood and examined the cabinet. The doors were slightly ajar. Inside were rows of neatly labeled items. One slot was empty, label still there like a missing tooth. Wolfe's gaze dropped to the floor. "There is powder," he said. I looked. At first it was nothing, just faint specks near the cabinet base. Then my eyes adjusted and I saw it. A pale, fine dust scattered in a thin line, almost invisible, unless you knew to look. It led from the cabinet toward the door, faint as a whisper. "A powder trail," I murmured. Keyes's eyes widened. "We didn't notice that." Wolfe's mouth tightened. "Of course you did not." I followed the trail with my eyes. It was not thick, not dramatic. It was the kind of residue left when someone handled a vial with a powdered glove, or when powder from packaging escaped during hurried movement. It was subtle enough to be missed by anyone who was not expecting evidence to behave like dust. Wolfe said, "This is not an accident." Keyes swallowed. "We thought perhaps a heart attack." Wolfe's eyes stayed on the body. "A heart attack does not steal a vial and leave powder." Keyes's voice trembled. "What do you think happened?" "I do not think," Wolfe replied. I will know if you answer questions. Wolfe turned his head slightly. Who had access to this room after hours? Kais hesitated again. This was becoming a habit. Technicians, physicians, security. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Names, lists, schedules. Kais nodded quickly. Yes, of course. I can get them, Wolfe said. And who, beyond his being dead, was Dr. Harlan Pritt to the people in this building? Kais blinked, as if surprised anyone would ask about the dead man instead of the facility. Senior physician, quiet, reliable. He handled difficult cases and oversaw imaging referrals. Difficult cases, I repeated. Kais nodded. The kind that require discretion, prominent patients. Wolfe's gaze sharpened, and therefore prominent secrets. Kais said nothing. His silence was confirmation. I looked at the X-ray table. The paper roll had been pulled out several feet, as if used recently. The surface was clean, too clean. The machine itself was idle, no hum, no warmth. But the room carried the faint sense of having recently been used like a stage after the actors have left. Wolfe asked, was Dr. Pritt scheduled to work this morning? No, Keyes said. He was not on the schedule. That is part of the complication. He should not have been here. Wolfe's voice was calm again, but it had sharpened. Then he came voluntarily, or he was summoned. Kais's eyes flicked to the door. He had access. He could come in. That is not my point, Wolfe said. Why did he come? Kais's jaw worked. We don't know, I said. Somebody called him. Kais swallowed. Possibly. We're checking phone logs. Wolfe's gaze returned to the brass nameplate on the door. The nameplate is smug, Wolfe said. Kais blinked, confused, smug. It declares the room, Wolfe replied. It declares legitimacy. It tells you are in a professional space, a controlled space. It encourages you to believe nothing improper occurs within. That is why this occurred here. That's poetic, I said. It is practical, Wolfe corrected. Footsteps sounded in the hall, heavy and official. Kramer's voice followed, annoyed before it even entered the room. Where is he? Kais stepped back. Inspector, in here. Kramer entered, hat in hand, coat collar up, face set like granite. He saw Wolfe and made a sound that was pure resentment. You, Kramer said. Wolfe inclined his head slightly. Inspector. Kramer's eyes moved to the body. His irritation shifted, became professional. He stepped closer, looked down, then straightened. Who found him? Kramer asked. Kais answered. Technician, Janet Hume. Kramer turned to Wolfe. You touch anything? No, Wolfe said. Kramer grunted as if disappointed. Wolfe had not given him a reason to yell. What do you know? Wolfe gestured slightly with his hand. A vial is missing. Powder trail. Dr. Pritt was not scheduled to be here. The scene is too neat for accident. Kramer stared at him. You already started. I arrived. Wolfe replied. Starting is what you do, Inspector. I merely observed. Kramer's mouth tightened. He looked at the powder trail. What the hell is that? Wolfe said. A whisper. It says someone left in a hurry or with something that shed residue. Kramer waved at Stebbins. Stebbins stepped in behind him, took one look, and began calling orders to uniforms in the hall. Kramer turned to Keyes. No one leaves. I want staff lists, schedules, keys, logs, everything. Keyes nodded rapidly, relieved to be given a task he could obey. Kramer looked back at Wolfe. This is my case. Wolfe's eyes were calm. Of course, your cases often come to my house to be solved. It is a pattern. Kramer's face reddened. Damn it, Wolfe, I interrupted. Because if you let those two build steam, the building will need repairs. Inspector, Keyes says Pritt wasn't scheduled. That's big. He was called in or he came to meet someone. Kramer snapped. I heard, Wolfe said. Then you will discover who summoned him. Kramer glared. And you'll sit and guess. Wolfe's voice stayed mild. I will sit and reason. It is more efficient. Kramer made a sound and went to the cabinet, examined the empty slot. Contrast agent, he said. That stuff dangerous. Kais cleared his throat. In the wrong hands, Wolfe said. Everything is dangerous in the wrong hands, doctor, even perfume. Kais looked confused, not knowing whether that was a joke. With Wolfe it rarely is. Kramer turned back to the body. Any idea cause of death? Wolfe looked at the dead man's face. Not yet, but I suspect something introduced rather than something natural, Kramer said. Poison. Kramer nodded, grudging. Me will tell us. Wolfe's eyes drifted to the floor again. Inspector, the powder trail leads to the door. That indicates the person left, but the door was shut and the lights were out. That indicates someone wished the room to remain cold and quiet. Kramer frowned. You saying staged? Yes, Wolfe replied. The killer wanted discovery delayed. Lights out, door shut. A neat scene. No panic. Kramer turned to Keyes. Who closes this room at night? Keyes answered quickly. Technicians, we have a closing checklist. Get it, Kramer said. Keyes hurried out. Kramer looked at Wolfe. So what? Somebody takes a vial and kills a doctor. Why call you? Wolfe's eyes narrowed slightly. Because they fear publicity, because they fear what the vial signifies, because they fear what Dr. Pritt knew. Kramer's jaw tightened. Secrets. Wolfe nodded. Yes. The medical examiner arrived a few minutes later, an efficient man with a case and a face that treated death as routine. He examined Pritt, checked pupils, noted absence of external trauma, made a few noises, and then turned to Kramer. No obvious injury, he said. Could be cardiac, could be chemical. I'll know after lab. Wolfe said. Examine the hands. The examiner looked at Wolfe, then at Kramer. Kramer said, do it. The examiner lifted Pritt's right hand and inspected the fingertips and under the nails. No defensive marks, he said. No struggle signs on the hands. I said, neat scene, yes. Wolfe murmured. Kramer's eyes went to Wolfe. You got anything useful beyond mood? Wolfe's gaze stayed on Pritt. Dr. Pritt came here to meet someone. He was not forced to fight. Therefore he expected the person. He was comfortable enough to allow the lights to be turned off or to turn them off himself. Perhaps to view an image, perhaps to conceal a meeting. Kramer frowned. Meet in an X-ray room, Wolfe said. It is private. It is controlled. It is a place where people assume professionalism. It is an excellent place to exchange a vial quietly. Kramer's eyes sharpened. You think the missing vial is the reason? Wolfe's voice stayed calm. I think it is both reason and clue. Stebbins returned with a clipboard. Janet Hume is here, he said. Kramer nodded. Bring her. Janet Hume entered. A woman in her 20s. Scrubs under a lab coat. Hair pulled back, face pale. She looked as if she had seen a ghost and then been asked to schedule it. Kramer asked, You found him? Yes, she whispered. I came into prep room. Door was shut, lights out. That's odd. I opened it, flipped the lights, and he was on the floor. Did you touch anything? Kramer asked. No, she said quickly. I called Dr. Keyes. Wolfe's eyes were on her. A chemical odor, Wolfe said. A powder, a sharpness, anything unusual. She swallowed. Number just clean, like always. Wolfe nodded slightly. Thank you, Kramer asked. Did anyone else have access last night? She hesitated. Dr. Pritt came in around 10. He said he needed to check a film. A film, I repeated. Yes, she said. He had a folder. He told me to leave him alone. He looked angry, not frightened. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. A folder, paper, I muttered. Kramer said. Who was with him? No one, Janet said. Not that I saw. He came alone. Wolfe asked, Did he look nervous? Janet shook her head. Number, he looked. Focused like he'd decided something. Wolfe nodded again. And he told you to leave him alone? Yes, she said. Kramer asked, Did you see him leave? No, Janet whispered. I left at 10:30. Kramer looked at Stebbins. Get her statement. Stebbins led her out. Wolfe said quietly. He had a folder. Kramer snapped. So what? Wolfe's gaze stayed steady. A folder in an X-ray room suggests records, images, reports. Something to review privately, or something to exchange. Kramer's eyes narrowed. You think he met someone after 10:30? Yes, Wolfe replied. And the lights were turned off again afterward. That was not done by a frightened intruder. It was done by someone with control. Kramer frowned. You making this sound like a business appointment? Wolfe's voice remained mild. It may have been. Kramer looked at keys, returning with papers. All right, we do it the hard way. Staff lists, access logs, keys, and I want a list of controlled vial withdrawals. Kais nodded, almost frantic. Yes, Inspector. Wolfe turned slightly toward me. Archie, obtain the names of those who had access to the supply cabinet and the security console. Also obtain the list of prominent patients Dr. Pritt handled recently. Kramer's head snapped around. You will not. Wolfe's eyes met his. Inspector, if you wish to solve this swiftly, you will permit me to observe the patterns your men will miss. If you wish to solve it slowly, you will fight me. Kramer glared, then muttered, Fine, observe. But don't interfere. Wolfe nodded, as if granting Kramer permission to exist. I looked once more at Dr. Pritt on the floor. The door shut, the lights out, the room arranged too neatly. A missing vial, a faint powder trail, a folder carried in with quiet purpose. The room's brass plate sat there like a smug alibi, declaring professionalism while murder cooled in the dark. Wolfe stood, heavy and deliberate, and I knew from the set of his shoulders that he had already decided this was not a medical problem. It was a human one, which is always worse, he said. A locked room is not a mystery, Archie. It is an announcement. Announcement of what? I asked. Wolfe's eyes remained on the dead man. That someone wished us to believe the door was the important barrier. It is not. The important barrier is silence. On a bright Monday morning, the X-ray room had gone cold. And when a room goes cold, that neatly, it is because someone with warm hands decided it should.
Once we took brass plate off the door, it stopped being an object and started being evidence. Let's look closer.
Chapter 5. Scratches. Screws and the ghost. Under brass after Pritt's death, Wolfe had a special contempt for objects that pretended to be simple. A brass plate is supposed to do one job, sit there and announce something dull, like a name or an office number. When it starts behaving like evidence, Wolfe treats it the way he treats a liar in a good suit. He becomes very quiet and very thorough. The brass plate in question was not in Wolfe's office. It was the one that had hung outside Dr. Harlan Pritt's office for years, bolted to the hall door, like a badge of inheritance. It read Harlan Pritt, Maryland in capital letters, burnished and proud. The sort of thing that says a man has arrived and intends to stay. Now the man was dead, and the plate had become evidence. We went in late morning. The medical building was open, busy, bright. Patients drifted past the directory and reception desks with the calm ignorance of people who believed trouble happened in other buildings. Up on Pritt's floor, the air was quieter. Carpets absorbed sound. Walls held secrets. Staff looked at us as if we were stains that kept returning. The superintendent met us at the corridor and tried to look like he had never been surprised in his life. Wolfe nodded to him without warmth. Mr. Barlow, Wolfe said. The plate, Barlow blinked. The plate, the brass plate outside Dr. Pritt's door, Wolfe said. I wish to see it removed. Cross stiffened. Why? Wolfe's eyes did not blink. Because it has been removed already, repeatedly. Cross opened his mouth to argue, then shut it. It is hard to argue with Wolfe when Wolfe has decided you are wasting his time. Barlow produced a screwdriver from a supply cabinet as if he had been expecting this moment. That in itself was a little too prepared for my taste. Wolfe noticed it too. I could tell by the way his eyes moved and then dismissed the detail into storage. Cross knelt, set the screwdriver to the top screw, and began turning. Wolfe leaned in slightly, peering at the screw head, the edges of the brass, and the small crescent of wood around each mount point. Wolfe did not touch. He observed. Wolfe's touch is expensive. Stop, Wolfe said. Cross froze with the screwdriver half turned. What? Wolfe pointed. Do you see the scratches? Around the mount. Cross stared. Scratches happen. Not like this, Wolfe said. I crouched, because my legs are insured for this. Around the brass plate's mount points. The wood was marked with thin, precise lines, tiny arcs where a tool had slipped and been corrected. Not the sloppy gouges of a prankster or a careless maintenance man. These marks had intention. They were the scars of repetition. I said, that looks like somebody's been taking it off and putting it back on like it's a hobby. Wolfe's voice remained calm. Yes, precise marks, repeated removal. Barlow's jaw tightened. That's absurd. Nobody removes a nameplate. Wolfe's eyes met his. Then why has yours been removed? Cross had no answer that could survive Wolfe's stare. He finished removing the screws, lifted the plate, and held it out. Wolfe did not take it. He gestured at a clean cloth I had brought, because Wolfe never trusts someone else's clean. I placed the cloth on the floor. Cross set the plate on it, and Wolfe knelt with reluctance and dignity, like a king inspecting a sewer. Under the plate, the oak door was lighter, protected from years of polishing. More important, there was residue, not a lot, just a thin line at the edge where the brass had met wood, a gritty film that caught the light, and a faint dusting near one corner that looked like the ghost of ink. Wolfe leaned closer and sniffed once. He straightened slightly and said, adhesive grit, ink dust, and a faint chemical smell. Cross frowned. Chemical. I sniffed too. There was something there, faint but sharp, the kind of odor you get from solvent, not from polish. Wolfe's gaze stayed on the residue. A plate is mounted with screws. If it is also mounted with adhesive, it means someone desired it not to rattle or desired it to leave a seal. The grit suggests a tape or compound. The ink dust suggests contact with paper, Barlow said. So what? Wolfe's eyes lifted, and the lift made Cross look smaller. So the plate was not stolen for its metal, it was borrowed for its meaning. I stood and brushed off my knees, meaning like an imprint, a rubbing. Wolfe's eyes narrowed in approval. Precisely, a brass plate can be pressed to paper. It can leave a raised impression if inked. It can also conceal something behind it. Barlow's voice went stiff. There was nothing behind it. Wolfe looked at him. You have not looked. Barlow's face colored. We would have noticed. Wolfe returned his attention to the door. He ran the tip of a pencil lightly along the lighter wood, not touching the residue directly, just coaxing it into revealing its pattern. The grit gathered in faint lines. There were edges, straight, deliberate, not random smear. It looked like something thin had been taped behind the plate. Removed, then replaced, then removed again. Wolfe stood. He did it slowly, as if his knees were offended to have been asked to participate. We will take this plate, he said. Barlow stiffened. You can't just take it. Wolfe's eyes turned cold. I can, because Inspector Kramer will authorize it when I tell him why. Or you can give it willingly and pretend you cooperate. Which do you prefer? Cross's lips pressed together. He nodded once. Sharp Wolfe gestured to me. Archie, fetch the building, ledger, the mail logs, and the janitor's supply list. Cross blinked. Why the janitor? Wolfe's voice remained mild. Because the chemical smell is not from brass. It is from something applied. A solvent, an adhesive remover, a cleaning compound. Those are issued. They are logged. If they are not, then someone acquired them unofficially. I looked at Barlow. Where do they keep that? Barlow hesitated, then said, Superintendent's office, basement. Good, I said. Walk me there. On the way down, I kept my eyes open. Executive buildings have their own ecosystem. Who nods, who looks away, who smiles too quickly. The elevator operator watched Cross more than he watched me. That told me Cross carried weight. It also told me weight can crush things if it needs to. The facilities office was a cramped space smelling of wax, damp mops, and resignation. A supervisor with a mustache and a defensive posture produced a ledger, a mail log binder, and a supply requisition file with the reluctant pride of a man who believes paper proves innocence. I carried them upstairs to Wolfe like offerings. Back in the corridor, Wolfe had Pritt's brass plate on the cloth and was examining its underside. The back was not clean, there were faint smudges, and at one edge a small patch that looked scuffed, as if something sticky had been rubbed away. Wolfe glanced at the ledgers. Good. I opened the building ledger first. It recorded after-hours access requests, maintenance entries, elevator use. It was dull reading, the sort of thing that makes you appreciate crime for its creativity. But dull documents are often the ones that catch liars, Wolfe said. Read aloud any entry involving Dr. Pritt's suite after hours. I did. There were maintenance checks, watchman notes, cleaning schedules. Then 3 entries spread across 2 weeks, each one marked as a short access for plaque maintenance. Plaque maintenance. I looked up. That's cute. Cross's face tightened. We sometimes polish brass. Wolfe's eyes stayed on the page, 3 times in 2 weeks. Cross said nothing. I checked the weekend service log deliveries, cleaning notes, elevator use. Nothing jumped out until I found a small notation. Special delivery held for Dr. Pritt's receptionist. Signature required. The date matched one of the plaque maintenance entries. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Who made those entries? Barlow's jaw worked. Miss Kroll. Wolfe nodded slightly, as if the name fit the groove already carved. He turned to the janitor's supply list. Wolfe's finger traced down the items with the attention of a man reading a menu. Adhesive remover, Wolfe said softly. Solvent wipes, ink pads. Cross's eyes flicked. Ink pads are for stamps. Also for impressions, Wolfe replied. I felt a small chill, the brass plate, removed repeatedly, treated with solvent associated with ink. Somebody had been making an imprint, a seal, or a fake, Wolfe, I said. If someone used the plate to make impressions, they could stamp Dr. Pritt's name on something. Wolfe's gaze lifted to mine. Yes, and if the object stamped was meant to appear official, the impression would matter. Like mail, I said, like a delivery slip, like a memo, like a threat letter. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Precisely. Cross's voice came out rough. This is insane. Wolfe's eyes turned toward him. Insane is a convenient word for something you do not wish explained. He gestured to the screw holes. Fresh scratches. Repeated removal. Adhesive residue, ink dust, chemical traces. These are not fantasies, they are facts. Someone borrowed the plate repeatedly, not for its brass, but for its authority. I looked down at the name Pritt shining under the corridor lights. It was just metal, but it had been treated like a key. Wolfe said quietly. A safe is not the only thing that can be opened by watching. Doors can be opened with legitimacy. Papers can be opened with a name, and the ghost under brass is always the person who thinks no one will notice the scratches. I closed the ledger. So now we see who authorized plaque maintenance. Wolfe nodded. And we see what papers were stamped with Dr. Pritt's name during those hours. Cross swallowed. His square answers had begun to look less square. Wolfe straightened his shoulders, as if the matter were now simple enough to offend him. Archie, he said. Telephone Inspector Kramer. Tell him I have a new category of evidence. Tell him it is bright, made of brass, and it has been talking. Outside. The building kept its quiet routines and professional reassurances. Inside, a nameplate had just confessed to being borrowed. And on Riddle Street, borrowed things tend to demand payment in a currency nobody likes.
In the end, the brass nameplate paid back every hand that ever borrowed it. Let's see what it leads.
Chapter 6. The parcels with the borrowed name a medical building has fewer boxes than a department store, but just as many chances to move one quietly. They come in, they go out. They stack in back rooms and vanish into freight elevators. and nobody questions them because boxes are the most innocent-looking liars in commerce. They sit there with tape seams like stitched mouths and labels like alibis, and everyone assumes they contain what they say. That is why I went looking for parcels. Wolfe had spent his morning hour upstairs with the orchids, as usual, because the man believes plants deserve punctuality even when people do not. Then he came down, sat at his desk, and listened to my report about the missing hallway footage, the plaque, maintenance entries, and the Sunday deliveries tied to Pritt's office. He said nothing for a minute, which meant he was rearranging the facts in his mind until they lined up the way he liked. Then, he said, "We must account for the movement of the nameplate and whatever traveled with its authority." "You mean the plate," I said. "I mean everything," Wolfe replied. "A thief who borrows a doctor's name must also transport whatever that name opens, unless you believe Miss Kroll carried an entire scheme in her handbag." "She could," I said. "Women's handbags have hidden dimensions." Wolfe glared at me briefly, then continued. "Archie, there were parcels." "Parcels," I repeated. "Yes," Wolfe said. "Small packages, clean, sealed, moving out of the medical building at hours when management believes the world is asleep. Find them." That was an order wrapped in Wolfe's mild tone. I took it the way I take all Wolfe orders, as a sentence with more walking than sitting. I went to the medical building by mid-morning, entered through the service door, and made my way to the basement receiving area where the building stopped pretending it was all velvet and lighting. Back there it smelled like cardboard, tape, and tired men. The kind of smell that is honest because it has no reason to impress you. The delivery clerk I wanted was a fellow named Leon Brackett. He had been pointed out by security as the one who remembers, which is a compliment in a place where memory is often inconvenient. He was in his 50s, with grey hair and a face built from routine. He looked at me with suspicion that softened only slightly when I said Wolfe's name. "Wolfe," he said. "The big guy, the detective." "That's him," I said. "I'm the smaller one, who does the talking." Brackett snorted. "What do you want?" "Weekend deliveries," I said. "Small packages. Weekends." His eyes narrowed. "We send out plenty." "Not plenty like these," I said. "Small, clean, always sealed. Always addressed in careful block print, not weekdays." "Weekends," Brackett hesitated, then shrugged. The way a man shrugs when he would rather not remember, but cannot help it. "Yeah, those." I nodded. "How many?" "Not a lot," he said. "1 or 2, sometimes 3, always Saturday. Sometimes Sunday if there was an event, not regular shipping, more like personal." "From who?" I asked. He scratched his chin. "They came down from the upper floor. Usually in a canvas bag. Someone would hand them over. No paperwork, just a label. Someone." I said. He shrugged again. "A young woman once, a man once, but mostly it was dropped and gone. You don't chase executive." "You do remember the labels," I said. "That's because they were neat," Brackett replied. "Careful block letters, like a kid doing homework." "Addressed where?" I asked. "Varied," he said. "Always local, Manhattan, Brooklyn, sometimes a private mailbox place." "Return name?" I asked. He gave a short laugh. "That's the funny part." "Funny is my favorite," I told him. "Return name was respectable," Brackett said. "It said the medical building executive office. Like it was official, like it was normal. A respectable name can open doors. A crowbar can't," I murmured. And Brackett nodded, as if I had finally said something he trusted. I asked, "Any names? Any borrowed names?" Brackett's eyes shifted. "One I remember because it stood out, the Harborline Historical Society." I kept my face calm, but inside I felt the click of a link locking into place. Historical Society is the kind of label that makes people think of old maps and polite donors, not extortion letters and perfume clocks. "Harborline," I said, letting the words sit. Brackett nodded. "Yeah, sounded fancy, sounded safe. It was borrowed," I said. He shrugged. "Could be. I don't know. I just move boxes. "Do you keep any old labels?" I asked. He hesitated, then opened a drawer and pulled out a small stack of torn shipping stickers. "Sometimes they peel wrong, and I toss them in here." I flipped through them. Most were ordinary. One had the same careful block print Brackett had described, and at the top, in neat letters, it read, "Harbour Line Historical Society." The return address printed beneath was Dr. Pritt's medical suite. I pocketed it like it was gold. "Thanks," I said. Brackett scratched his head. "What's this about, anyway?" "It's about someone using your shipping room like a post office for lies," I said, "and about a dead man who thought his safe was the only place trouble could hide." "I didn't do nothing." "I know," I said. "If you had, you'd be sweating and denying it with poetry." Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was in his office. Cigar unlit, eyes alert, he took the label from my hand as if it might contaminate his desk with vulgarity. He studied it for a long moment, then said, "Block print. Stencil derived." I blinked. "Stencil." "Yes," Wolfe replied. "This is careful, but it is too uniform. Certain curves repeat exactly. Certain lines are identical in thickness. It suggests a template." "You mean they traced it?" I said. "I mean," Wolfe said, "they used a plate." He opened a drawer and removed a small magnifying glass, then examined the sticker again. "There is residue," he murmured. "Residue," I repeated. "From what?" Wolfe did not answer until he had made his next move. He went to the cabinet where he kept his small testing supplies and returned with a swab and a tiny vial. He dabbed lightly at the corner of the sticker where the adhesive had been peeled, then held the swab up to the light. "Packing adhesive," he said, "and stencil ink." I stared. "You can smell ink." "I can identify it," Wolfe corrected. "Ink and adhesive are familiar substances. They have habits." He set the swab down and leaned back. "A doctor's brass plate," he said. "A brass plate," I echoed. "Yes," Wolfe replied. "A nameplate. The kind found on doors, desks, offices. It can be removed, pressed to paper, used as a stencil template. It produces consistent lettering without requiring skill." "Meaning someone borrowed a name," I said. "Exactly," Wolfe replied. "They borrowed respectability, legitimacy, and access to move parcels, records, and supplies under Dr. Pritt's name. A respectable name can open doors a crowbar cannot." I felt the outline of it forming. So these weekend parcels weren't store shipments. They were personal drops, sent under Dr. Pritt's name or under a borrowed organization name. The thief didn't just forge letters, they forged identity. Wolfe nodded. "And they did it on weekends because fewer eyes observe, fewer records are kept, and the building's routine is looser." "Who would know that?" I asked. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Someone who belongs there. Someone who moves through the building's back corridors without being challenged." "Tessa Kroll," I said. Wolfe did not confirm, but he did not need to. He tapped the label once, like a judge marking a point. "This," Wolfe said, "is not merely shipping. It is logistics. It is the movement of evidence, the movement of threats, the movement of copies. It is the artery of the scheme." "And the brass plate," I said. "Where do we find it?" Wolfe's mouth tightened. "On a door, Archie, or in a pocket." He looked at me with calm finality. "Return to the medical building, find the plate, find the template, and discover who has been borrowing names the way thieves borrow money." I nodded, already feeling the city shift again. Boxes, weekend shipments, a borrowed society name, a brass plate turned into a stencil. On Riddle Street, you learn early that breaking in is crude. The clever ones belong. The clever ones borrow professional respectability and use it like a key. And once you see the key, you start looking for the hand that keeps it.
What they borrowed from Dr. Britt wasn't not just his name, but the authority that came with. Let's get into it.
Chapter 7. The clinic that doesn't exist in New York. Parcels travel the way rumors do, fast, quiet, and with more stops than anyone admits. If you want to follow them, you do not ask at the front desk. You ask at the back door, where favors have their own operating hours, and receipts are a thing people laugh about. Wolfe did not follow parcels. Wolfe followed logic. I followed parcels because my shoes were cheaper than his principles. The trail began with the missing nameplate and the tomorrow perfume clue, but Wolfe had turned it a quarter turn and exposed another edge. The forged work order and the blank hour on the hallway camera had not been created for ordinary maintenance. They were created to move something through the building without anyone being able to prove it moved. A bottle fit for a handbag, a borrowed name, a hidden clinic running on schedule. It all looked like vanity until Wolfe said one sentence that made it ugly. "Archie," he had told me that morning, "a medical building is a convenient artery. It carries parcels and records under innocent pretexts. If someone used Dr. Pritt's corridor as a conduit, the destination matters more than the disguise." So I went looking for the destination. The first name was not a name. It was a service. Cross, before Kramer had him cuffed, had let a word slip. The way a man does when he believes he is still bargaining. He had called it a favor runner, a courier outfit that did not advertise. They delivered things that did not want to be delivered officially. Saul Panzer got me an address, and by mid-afternoon I was standing in a narrow lane off 9th Avenue behind a row of warehouses that smelled like cardboard and diesel. A steel door sat under a broken light. No sign, no bell, just a small peephole that made you feel the building was watching you. I knocked, the peephole slid open. An eye appeared, bored and suspicious. "What?" the eye said. I gave my name. I gave a name Saul had supplied as a key, and I gave a $20 bill folded in a way that suggested it had friends. The door opened. Inside was a long room with shelves, bins and men who looked like they could carry packages and grudges with equal ease. The air smelled of tape, paper and cheap coffee. A man behind a counter looked up as if he had been waiting for me, which made me dislike Saul's thoroughness. "Favors," I said. The man's mouth twitched. "We deliver." "Sure," I said. "And sometimes you don't." His eyes narrowed. "Depends." I slid another bill across the counter. "I'm tracing a route, small parcels, light, sealed, picked up near the medical building." His gaze dropped to the bill. "That building, it has trouble." "It does," I agreed. "This trouble is portable. I want the destination." He hesitated. "We don't keep records," I said. "Of course you do. You just don't call them records. You call them insurance." His mouth tightened. He took the bill, tucked it away, and leaned back slightly. "What day?" I gave him the day Wolfe had specified, the night of the blank hour. The man reached under the counter and pulled out a battered notebook. He flipped pages with fingers stained from ink and habit. He stopped, frowned, and looked at me. "You a cop?" he asked. "I'm worse," I said. "I work for Nero Wolfe." His frown deepened, then softened into resignation. "I heard of him." "Then you know he doesn't like being lied to," I said. The man made a small sound. "Nobody likes it. Wolfe charges for his dislike," I replied. The man flipped another page and pointed with a finger. 3 parcels, pick up, upper floor, delivered to a drop, not a name, rented room. "Where?" I asked. He gave me an address in Chelsea, a storefront building on a block that had been renovated so many times, it looked exhausted. "You didn't deliver to a person," I said. "You delivered to a room." He nodded. "Key and lockbox, we leave. We don't look." "People who do favors always look," I told him. His eyes hardened. "Not if they want to stay alive." I left him his bills and his fear and went back out into the lane where the light was grey and honest. I called Wolfe from a payphone because Wolfe prefers his intelligence delivered clean. "Address," I said, and gave it. Wolfe was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Proceed carefully." That was Wolfe speaking my language. It meant I should expect the next step to be armed, or diseased, or both. The address led to a rented side office over a narrow storefront with paper taped to the inside of the glass. For lease, the sign was faded, the letters peeling, the kind of lease advertisement that means no one has tried very hard to lease it. That should have made it harmless. It did not. The door was locked, but the lock was old, and old locks respect the first person who behaves as if they belong. I had no key, but I had a certain amount of confidence and a thin tool in my pocket that had opened more doors than I deserved. Inside, the storefront was empty in the way a room is empty when someone has recently removed everything and hoped the smell would go with it. Dust lay in clean lines, disturbed by foot traffic. A faint chemical tang lingered, sharp and wrong. My footsteps sounded loud on bare floorboards. Stairs rose at the back, narrow and steep. I climbed them quietly because I have survived long enough to know the best way to lose is to announce yourself. At the top was a hallway with 2 doors. One door was closed and painted. The other door had a fresh lock and faint scuff marks near the knob, as if keys had been used often. That was my room. I listened. Nothing. No voices. No radio. No footsteps. The kind of quiet that is either safe or staged. I tried the knob locked. I found the lockbox the courier man had mentioned, mounted beside the doorframe. It was cheap, the sort used by real estate agents who trust metal more than people. I opened it with a hairpin and a little contempt. Inside was a key. When a key is that easy to find, it means someone expects you to use it. That is either carelessness or confidence. Neither is comforting. I unlocked the door and went in. The room was lit by a single bulb that buzzed faintly. The window was covered with paper taped in overlapping strips to block sight from outside. A folding table stood in the center. On it were items that did not belong in a rented room over an empty storefront. Medical supplies and waste. Not the dramatic kind from movies, the ordinary kind, which is worse. A red bag half filled with used gauze. A cardboard box with a biohazard symbol. A small metal tray with dried residue. A stack of stripped labels, peeled clean and tossed in a pile like dead skin. And on a chair beside the table, a stack of cheap X-ray film in paper sleeves, the sort a respectable clinic could move without raising questions. It took me a moment to swallow, because the smell in the room was not only chemical, it was the sour edge of antiseptic mixed with something metallic. Not blood, exactly, but the memory of it. I stepped closer to the X-ray film. The sleeves were thin, the kind that tear easily. They had been handled recently. I could see fingerprints, faint smudges on the glossy paper, fresh enough to reflect light. Someone had been here today. I heard a sound behind me, not a footstep, a shift, a small scrape. I spun, quick, heart, thumping hard enough to complain, and saw nothing in the doorway. The hallway was empty. The stairs were empty. But the room suddenly felt less empty than it had. I moved to the corner, because corners make you harder to surprise, and took out my gun, which I prefer not to use but prefer to have. I waited, listening, nothing. Then I saw it. A coat hanging on a hook near the door. It had been there the whole time, but now my eyes noticed the bulge in the pocket. The pocket was heavy. I crossed slowly, pulled the coat off the hook, and reached into the pocket. A small, glass bottle, handbag-sized. The label had been peeled off. But I did not need a label. I uncapped it and sniffed once, carefully tomorrow. So the perfume had not only marked a safe, it had traveled, it had been carried. It had served as a tag, a clock, and now a breadcrumb. I found another item in the coat pocket, a folded slip of paper. It was not a threat letter. It was a printed appointment schedule, names listed as initials, times, and a single line at the bottom. Dr. Pritt. I recognized the name because Wolfe had recognized it earlier that week in a context that had bothered him. Dr. Harlan Pritt was a respectable physician with a respectable practice and a respectable reputation for never doing anything that would put him in a police report. His name did not belong on a schedule taped inside a paper-covered window. I tucked the bottle and the schedule into an evidence envelope and stepped back, scanning the room again with new eyes. This was not a clinic. It was a staging room. A pass-through point. A place where supplies arrived in parcels, where labels were stripped, where film was stored, where paperwork was reduced to initials and a borrowed name. Someone was running an illegal clinic, and Dr. Pritt's name was the mask on its face. I took a slow breath and went back downstairs, locking the door behind me. On the street, the afternoon light looked suddenly too normal. People walked past with shopping bags and coffee cups, unaware they were passing a room where bodies had been treated like merchandise. He hailed a taxi and went straight to the brownstone. Wolfe was in his office, seated, cigar, lit, eyes steady. He looked as if he had not moved since I left, though I knew he had, because the orchid schedule is not optional even when crime is. He watched my face as I came in, and his gaze sharpened a fraction. "You found something," he said. "I found a clinic that doesn't exist," I told him. "And I found the smell. And I found a name." I laid the evidence on his desk, the schedule, the stripped labels, the photo I had snapped of the X-ray film stack, the bottle of tomorrow with no label. Wolfe sniffed the bottle once, then closed it with an expression of disgust. "Yes, the same." He read the schedule, eyes moving slowly, then stopped on the line that mattered. "Dr. Pritt," he set the paper down, fingers steepled. "When a crime borrows your name," Wolfe said, "it eventually borrows your life." I nodded. "So we warn him." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "We summon him." "You think he's involved?" I said. "I think," Wolfe replied, "that a respectable physician will either be guilty or terrified. In both cases, he will be useful." I sat down and let the day settle. We had started with a clue that smelled like tomorrow. We had found a blank hour, a staged death, a borrower with a bottle. Now we had a phantom clinic and a doctor whose name had been drafted into a crime without his permission. On Riddle Street. That is how cases grow. They do not move in straight lines. They spiral outward until every clean surface is smudged and every harmless name becomes a target. Wolfe looked at me. "Archie, tonight we lock the doors." "We always do," I said. Wolfe's mouth tightened. "Tonight we lock them as if someone means to enter anyway." I glanced at the little bottle on his desk, so small and innocent-looking. It had marked time, marked paper, and now marked a place where illegal medicine was being performed under a borrowed name. I said, "Tomorrow is getting crowded." Wolfe's eyes hardened slightly. "Then we will make it smaller."
Hidden clinics don't announce themselves, they borrow somebody else's respectability and wait in silence. Let's go deeper.
Chapter 8. The Watchman, the Superintendent, and the quiet lie Wolfe has a special distaste for declarations that begin with nobody. Nobody did it. Nobody saw it. Nobody enters after dark. In his experience, nobody is always a person with a name, an alibi, and a reason to keep his hands clean. I brought the problem to him at breakfast, along with the latest from the medical building. The bright aisles were still bright, but the air behind the counters had changed. Death makes even clean hallways smell anxious. "The doorman says the hallway camera failed by itself," I told Wolfe. "The watchman says nobody enters after dark. The superintendent says plaque maintenance is routine. Miss Kroll says everything was routine. Nobody says anything useful." Wolfe buttered a piece of toast as if butter were a philosophical argument. "And the watchman." "The night watchman," I said. "He says no one enters after dark." Wolfe looked at me over the rim of his glasses. "Then Mr. Mellor is either a fool or a liar. Take your choice." I took liar, I said. "It fits better." "Then go," Wolfe said, "and return with something that makes his lie expensive." So I went back to the medical building this time by the service entrance where the air smells of cartons and floor wax instead of money and velvet. Service hallways are always the same, whether a building is prosperous or doomed. Same tired paint, same humming fluorescents, same doors marked with words like storage and staff, only as if the building were ashamed of its own organs. The night watchman met me near the service stair, carrying a ring of keys like it was his badge of office. He was a thick-set man in his 50s, hair thinning, hands big and scarred, face lined with the permanent patience of someone who had checked other people's doors for too long. His eyes were small but alert. He had the look of a man who knows every corner of a building and would rather you did not ask him about any of them. "Goodwin," he said, "you back again." "I'm developing affection," I told him. It happens when people keep dying. He frowned, not enjoying my tone. I already talked to the cops. Cops ask questions like they're checking boxes, I said. I ask questions like I want answers. He bristled. I told them no one enters after dark. Not this floor, not the doctor's corridor. Only security and me. I nodded. That's a nice line. It almost sounds like policy. It is policy, he insisted. I smiled. Policy is what people say when they want you to forget reality. He pushed the mop bucket a little, as if giving himself something to do with his hands. Look, mister. We lock up, we clean, we leave. We don't wander around private offices sniffing safes. You don't, I agreed, but someone did. His eyes narrowed. You accusing me? I'm interviewing you, I said. Accusing comes later, when Wolfe is bored. His mouth tightened. Who's Wolfe? That, I said, is the wrong question. I took out my notebook. Let's start with simple. What time do your men come in? 7, he said. And leave? After midnight, he said. Depends. Who has keys? I asked. Meller, he said, thumping his chest with a thumb. And my lead man, name. Reggie Holt. And who else? No one, he said quickly. Keys stay on me. I nodded toward his belt. A heavy ring hung there, crowded with keys of different shapes and sizes, some worn smooth, some newer, all of them jingling softly when he shifted. It looked like the kind of ring a man grows attached to keys, our power in a building full of locked doors. Those keys, I said, they open private offices. They open what I need, he snapped. Closets, utility rooms, not safes. I'm not asking about safes, I said. I'm asking about doors. Doors that let a person stand close enough to watch private routines without being noticed. Doors that let a person apply perfume to felt and then walk out like they belong. He stared at me. The mop bucket sat between us like a neutral witness. You got a problem, he said finally. Not me, maybe, I said, but you've got the keys to my problem. It was a small flick, but it had direction, and direction is information. I said, Gus, the cameras have a missing hour, 10:40 to 11:30. That doesn't happen by accident. He stiffened. That's security. Security is Cross, I said. He shrugged too hard, then talked to Cross. I will, I said, but first I want to know who could move in that window without being remembered. He glared. Nobody. Nobody doesn't push a mop, I said. Somebody does. His jaw clenched. You're wasting my time. I kept my voice mild. Mild is how you keep a man talking long enough to slip. I'm going to ask again, Gus. Who could be on this floor after dark without raising an eyebrow? He stared at me, and for a moment his face showed irritation, then calculation, then something close to fear. He recovered quickly. Cleaning crew, he said. They belong here. Exactly, I said. The man who belongs. He looked away. That was my first quiet lie of the day. The second arrived when I asked him about the inventory check log entry near the perfume counter. Not my department, he said. It's your building, I replied. It becomes your department when someone uses it to kill Dr. Pritt. He opened his mouth, then shut it, I said. Let's take a walk. Show me where your supplies are kept. He hesitated, but refusing to show me would have been too obvious. And Gus Meller did not look like a man who enjoyed obviousness. He pushed the mop bucket down the corridor and unlocked a janitor's room with a practiced twist. Inside were shelves of cleaning solutions, rags, polishers, and a row of lockers in the back, dented and painted a tired grey. You happy? He asked. I will be, I said. When you stop lying to me, he snapped. I'm not lying. I walked to the lockers. Each had a small label with a name, most were ordinary. One was Gus Meller's, I pointed at it. Open it, I said. His eyes narrowed. You can't go through my locker. I can't, I agreed. But the police can. And if I call Inspector Kramer and tell him the man who swears nobody enters after dark is refusing a simple request, he will bring a warrant and a bad mood. Gus's face darkened. He hated the idea of cops in his locker more than he hated me in his hallway that told me something about what he feared. "Fine," he said, and unlocked it. Inside were work gloves, a folded uniform shirt, a thermos, and a small tool pouch. I pointed at the pouch. It's tools," he said quickly, "for work." I opened it because Gus had opened the locker, and I was not in the mood to negotiate further. The pouch held a screwdriver set, the kind sold in hardware stores, to men who enjoy taking things apart. The handles were black, the metal shafts were clean. Too clean. I pulled one out and held it under the light. The shaft was wiped, yes, but in the grooves near the tip there was a dark grit. Not dust, not ordinary dirt. Ink black, fine, and stubborn, packed in like someone had tried to clean quickly and missed the places that require patience. I looked at Gus. "You've been using this to change light fixtures." His mouth tightened. "It's from work." "From what work?" I asked. "Opening a panel in the security console, popping a latch on a locked case, scraping at something you weren't supposed to touch." His eyes flashed. "I don't touch security equipment." I held the screwdriver up, then explained the ink grit. He swallowed. His gaze darted to the doorway as if hoping someone would walk in and give him an excuse to stop talking. I said, "You're not the hand that wrote this plan, Gus. You don't look like an inventor. You look like a man who's been told to do a thing and keep his mouth shut." He glared. "You don't know anything about me." "I know you're sweating," I said, "and it's not from mopping." His shoulders slumped a fraction. Then he stiffened again, fighting his own body. "I didn't kill Dr. Pritt." "I didn't say you did," I replied. "I said you're lying. There's a difference." He stared at the screwdriver, then at me, then down at the floor, wax stains that would never truly come out. Finally, he spoke, voice low. "I got called in that night late." "By who?" I asked. He hesitated. "Gus," I said, "a man is dead. You don't get to protect a paycheck with silence anymore." He swallowed. "Cross." That was satisfying, but not enough. I nodded. "Cross called you in late. Why?" "He said there was a problem," Gus muttered. "A console, a camera feed. Something wasn't recording right, and you fixed it," I said. He shook his head quickly. "I didn't fix nothing. I looked. I moved a panel. I tightened a screw. That's all." "Which panel?" I asked. His eyes flicked away. "Security room." "There it is," I said. "That missing hour didn't vanish." "It was made to vanish," he flinched. "I didn't delete nothing." "No," I said. "You opened it. You made it possible. Cross did the deleting, or someone beside him did. And you did the quiet part, the part that looks like maintenance." Gus's jaw worked. "I just do my job." "You did someone else's job," I said. He stared at me, and I could see the shape of his fear now. Not fear of guilt, fear of consequences from someone who could make his life harder than mine could. "Who else was there?" I asked. He shook his head. "Just Cross." "You're lying again," I said gently. "Cross doesn't innovate. He intimidates. This scheme had style. It had timing. It had perfume. Cross doesn't smell like tomorrow. He smells like control." Gus's eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. He knew the truth of that line the way a man knows the weight of his own keyring. He whispered, "There was a woman." "Name," I said. He hesitated again, then blurted, "Tessa Kroll." That name snapped into place like the last piece in a box you've been shaking for days. I stood very still. "The accountant." Gus nodded miserably. "She was there. She talked to Cross like she owned him. She told him what to do. I didn't listen, not really. But I heard her say something about a letter and the safe and making sure Dr. Pritt didn't see the wrong thing. I felt my stomach tighten. A letter that wasn't there. A forged request. A missing hour. and now a janitor's screwdriver with ink-black grit in the grooves. I said, "What did she have with her?" Gus swallowed. "A little bottle. She put it in her purse fast when she saw me." My mind supplied the rest. "A bottle that fits a handbag tomorrow." He closed the locker gently and looked at Gus. "You're a tool," I said. His face reddened. "I'm a man." "You're a man who answered to a more complicated one," I said. "On Riddle Street, that's dangerous." He whispered, "What happens to me?" "That depends," I said, "on whether you keep telling the truth." He looked up, desperate. "I didn't want nobody dead." "Then help keep the next one alive," I said. "Tell me everything you did, exact times, exact places, what Cross asked you to open, what Miss Kroll touched, what she said." He nodded, quickly, like a man grabbing a rope thrown into deep water. By the time I left the building, my notebook was full of details, and my patience was thin. The city outside was loud, indifferent, and wet with evening. Taxis splashed. People hurried. The streetlights made the pavement shine like polished trouble. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe listened without interrupting while I laid it out. Gus Mellor's keyring, his claim collapsing, the screwdriver set wiped clean, except for ink-black grit. Cross's call, Miss Kroll's presence, the little bottle in her purse. Wolfe's eyes narrowed at the right places. When I finished, he sat back and made a small sound. "Your watchman," Wolfe said, "is indeed a tool." "Yeah," I replied, "but he's a tool that finally talked." Wolfe nodded once, "And therefore he becomes useful." I leaned forward. "You're going to bring them in?" "Yes," Wolfe said calmly. "We will invite the lies to sit down. The more complicated liar will not enjoy the company." "And Cross," I said, "he'll try to act tough." Wolfe's mouth tightened. "He will act as he is instructed. We will see by whom." I exhaled. On Riddle Street, the simplest liar usually answers to a more complicated one. Wolfe's eyes hardened slightly, the way they do when he is about to turn a suspicion into a conclusion. "Precisely," he said. "And tomorrow we will meet the one who believes she can plan silence and call it safety."
A respectable name can move a parcel further than forked key ever could. Let's follow the trail.
Chapter 9. The borrowed name Wolfe has a talent for making repetition look sinister. Most people see a routine and think comfort. Wolfe sees a routine and thinks concealment. Comfort, to him, is what criminals buy with habit. He had been quiet all morning, the kind of quiet that means he is assembling a mechanism. The orchids upstairs had received their hour. Fritz had produced breakfast with his usual insistence that civilization has obligations, and I had sat at my desk sorting notes that already felt like they belonged to two different crimes. Wolfe did not hurry me. Wolfe rarely hurries anything except my patience. When he finally spoke, it was not a question, it was a reconstruction. "Archie," he said, "the plate was not removed for mischief." I looked up from my notebook. "Which plate?" "The one from Dr. Pritt's door," Wolfe replied, as if there were only one plate in the world worth discussing. The brass nameplate repeatedly removed from his office and used to borrow his identity. We were dealing now with the borrowed name operation, the one that used Dr. Pritt's respectable title and office identity when it wanted to appear legitimate. It had X-ray shielding in the walls and secrecy in the air, and it sat in a building where the tenants minded their own business, because minding other people's business is how you lose your lease. 2 chapters earlier, the plate had seemed like a small detail, a brass rectangle screwed into an office door, the kind of thing you pass without thinking. Wolfe had not passed it without thinking. He had stared at it for a full minute, then asked me to fetch a screwdriver, then told me not to touch anything while he made the screws confess. Now he was ready to explain why. He leaned back in his chair, fingers tented, eyes half-lidded. "Consider the sequence. Remove the plate. Use the borrowed name. Rehang the plate. Restore the hallway." I blinked. "Stencil parcels." "Yes," Wolfe said. "The plate covers a slot large enough to pass small packages through a shielded cavity, a private conduit. It is used to move material without bringing it through the main door, I said. So it's a dumbwaiter for people who don't want to be seen. It is more intelligent than the people who use it, Wolfe replied. They thought the shielding would protect them. Shielding protects only from radiation, not from observation. Okay, I said. Remove plate, pass parcels, rehang plate. But why stencil? Wolfe's mouth tightened slightly, that familiar signal that I was being slow. Inventory, he said. Inventory, I repeated. Yes, Wolfe continued. A scheduled operation requires scheduled use, deliveries, messages, authorizations. They did not improvise. They repeated. He paused, letting it settle. Outside, a taxi honked in irritation at something that could not be corrected by horn, and the city kept moving as if it had never heard of the borrowed name clinic. You asked earlier, Wolfe said, why the plate was removed repeatedly, always on weekends, always late, always with the same careful reattachment. If it were simple smuggling, they would move items when convenient, but they moved items when expected. I leaned forward. A weekend ritual. Wolfe nodded. A weekly routine. The clinic ran on scheduled inventory. That is why the markings were consistent. He lifted a sheet of paper from his desk and slid it toward me. It was a rubbing I had taken of the inside of the plate, graphite on paper, showing faint lines and numbers. At the time, it had looked like the sort of scribble a bored maintenance man might make. Now it looked like a language. Transfer marks, Wolfe said. Notations from repeated use. Crude, but practical. They could align the plate quickly and remove it without hesitation. Deliveries, messages, authorizations, I said. You keep saying repeated use. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Repetition is the easiest medium for concealment in a respectable building. It is expected. It can be blank. It can be exposed. It can contain images or documents. If you are moving contraband through a clinic, film is both camouflage and carrier. I had an unpleasant thought. And paperwork is how you launder it after. Wolfe nodded once. Precisely. They needed a timetable and a quiet place with shielding. They found both. Dr. Harlan Pritt, the clinic's respectable face, a man with good credentials and tired eyes who had told us, with convincing indignation, that he ran a legitimate diagnostic service and had no idea why anyone would accuse him of anything beyond billing errors. He was also the man who had ended up dead in a room lined with lead. Wolfe spoke calmly. Dr. Pritt discovered the pattern. He noticed the screw scratches, the plate's shifting alignment, and the fact that it returned too clean on Monday mornings. I sat back. That would do it. You remove something weekly, you start leaving scars. Exactly, Wolfe said. They were careful, but they were repetitive. Repetition is the enemy of perfection. I could picture it now, a screw turned too often, a head slightly burred, a plate reattached a hair off center, then nudged back, then off again, a man who worked in imaging, who spent his days noticing tiny shifts, would see it. He could not help seeing it. It was his profession. So Pritt notices, I said. Then what? He confronts Miss Kroll. Wolfe's eyes stayed steady. Yes, he confronted someone. Perhaps he demanded payment. Perhaps he threatened police. Perhaps he merely panicked. Panic is popular, I said. It is also loud, Wolfe replied. But the killer did not need rage, only opportunity. I frowned. You think it was quiet? Very quiet, Wolfe said. A timetable and a quiet place with X-ray shielding. The shielding muffles. The clinic schedule isolates. A confrontation in a shielded room is a conversation in a box. I glanced toward the door, as if the clinic itself might be standing there listening, and the killer needed him out of the way before the next Monday return. Wolfe nodded. Or before he spoke to the wrong person. Who did he confront? I asked. Wolfe's mouth curled faintly. That is the remaining question, but the list is shorter than you think. I rifled through my notes. We had names. We always had names: a clinic administrator with clean hands and dirty bookkeeping, a radiology tech who knew the shielding panels like a carpenter, knows wood grain, A courier who delivered supplies at odd hours and asked no questions. A landlord's superintendent who had keys and no curiosity, and a consultant who did not appear in payroll records, but appeared in every tense conversation like a shadow in a doorway. Summonen had to remove the plate, I said. That means tools, access comfort with the corridor. Correct, Wolfe replied. The person who handled the plate was either maintenance, security, or a technician, someone who could be present after hours without explanation. And the person who ran the inventory, I said, was the one who insisted it be repeated weekly. Wolfe lifted a finger. Yes, that is the point, Archie. This was not chaos, it was logistics. I made a face. I hate logistics. It makes crime sound like a business. It is a business, Wolfe said, only less taxed. He reached for a small envelope and tapped it lightly on the blotter. Dr. Pritt's last appointment schedule. I stared. You got that? Sol Panzer got it, Wolfe corrected. I merely profited. I took the envelope, opened it, and read. Pritt had seen patients Friday afternoon, then had a gap late Friday, then one appointment marked in pencil on Saturday morning. Inventory consult. No patient name, no billing code, just that. I looked up. Inventory consult. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. There is your confrontation. He did not stumble upon it by chance. He was summoned. Summoned by who? I asked. Wolfe's voice stayed mild. By the person who believed Pritt already knew too much, or by the person who feared he might learn it. I stared at the pencil entry. So, the killer called him in, used the shielded room, and ended it. Yes, Wolfe said. And then continued the routine, because routines do not stop unless you force them. My jaw tightened. They killed him to preserve the schedule. Wolfe nodded. Inventory, not mischief. I looked at Wolfe. So, what's our next move? Wolfe leaned back, eyes half-lidded again. The look he wears when he is enjoying the clean edge of logic. We do what you dislike. We follow logistics. We identify who had access to the plate on weekends, who could erase footsteps, and who benefits from a clinic operating like a warehouse. And then, I said, we invite them here and watch them lie. Wolfe's mouth curled slightly. Yes, lies are revealing when they are forced to sit in my chairs. I stood, because Wolfe was done and my legs were now required. You want me to go back to the clinic? Yes, Wolfe said. Tonight, I repeated. You say it like it's a favor. It is a necessity, Wolfe replied. The schedule is weekly. The weekend approaches. If they continue, they will move something. If they move something, they may expose themselves. I paused at the door. And if they notice me? Wolfe's eyes sharpened. Then they will attempt to make you quiet as well. Avoid that. I'll do my best, I said. My best is famous. Wolfe did not smile. He merely added, Archie, bring me a photograph of the plate as it is now, aligned. Then bring me a photograph after you have watched them touch it. I nodded and left the office, already feeling the clinic's lead-line silence closing around my imagination like a lid. On Riddle Street, crimes rarely happen because someone loses control. They happen because someone keeps control too long. And when control is measured in weekly inventory, the murderer does not need rage. Only a timetable, and a quiet place where even screams sound like paperwork being filed. Chapter 10. The brass nameplate pays its debt. Wolfe's office, on West 35th Street, has seen every variety of human vanity, from the kind that arrives in mink to the kind that arrives in handcuffs. On that evening it hosted a quieter breed, people who had learned to keep their voices down because their work depended on clean walls, clean records, and clean lies. The brass nameplate was on the door. It gleamed there as if it had never been anywhere else, as if it had not spent 2 weeks missing and 2 days serving as a silent passport for a crime. The letters were crisp, the surface newly polished, the shine bright enough to make you forget that brass only looks innocent when it has been wiped. I had watched Fritz wipe it earlier with the same expression he uses when he removes a stain from linen, Fritz can be outraged without raising his voice. He had not asked how the plate had wandered. He had simply returned it to its proper place, because Fritz believes objects should not indulge in adventure unless they are food. Wolfe sat behind his desk, hands folded, face composed. He had eaten his dinner at the proper time. He had spent his hour upstairs with the orchids. He had taken his comfort and then set it aside, which is Wolfe's way of announcing to the universe that the universe is now required to behave. Kramer was there, naturally. He stood to one side with his hat in his hand and his patience in short supply. He had the look of a man who knows he is about to be embarrassed and is trying to decide whether it will be worth the result. You insisted. Kramer growled, not to Wolfe, but to the room at large, as if the wallpaper were responsible. Wolfe regarded him calmly. Inspector, you came because I promised you the correct culprit. If you prefer the incorrect one, you may return to the street and arrest a lamppost. Kramer muttered something about my employer that would not look good in print. The others arrived in the order Wolfe had arranged, which is always the order that makes people most uncomfortable. The night watchman came first. He was a hallway functionary, the kind of man who can move envelopes all day and still look surprised that paper has consequences. He wore a cheap suit and a nervous smile, and he kept wiping his palms on his thighs as if his hands had been sweating since childhood. The superintendent came next, a compact man with a key ring that might have qualified as a weapon. He had a face built out of rules and a posture that suggested he enjoyed enforcing them. His name was Harlan Sedge. Wolfe had called him the man who believes a hallway is a kingdom, which was accurate enough to be unkind. Last came Miss Kroll, receptionist and office manager to Dr. Pritt. She entered with her head high, her coat neatly buttoned, her expression composed into a professional calm that had probably soothed hundreds of anxious patients. She was in her 30s, hair pinned back, eyes clear and steady. She looked like competence with good lighting. She also looked, to me, like a person who had spent too long practicing not to react. Wolfe indicated the chairs with a small motion of his hand. Sit. They sat. Gus perched as if the chair might accuse him. Sedge sat solidly, like a manager anchoring his property. Miss Kroll sat with an elegant stillness that made her look above the situation, which is a common mistake. Wolfe loves it when people believe they are above him. I took my place by my desk with my notebook open, mostly out of habit, and partly because I like having something between me and a room full of trouble. Wolfe began without preamble. We will speak of a brass nameplate. Gus blinked. Sedge frowned. Miss Kroll's eyes did not change. Wolfe continued, voice mild. The plate was removed from Dr. Pritt's door. It was later used to gain access to restricted areas within his clinic and building. Then it was returned, polished, as if polish could erase use. Sedge cleared his throat. If someone stole a nameplate, that's vandalism. We have rules. Yes, Wolfe said. And we also have a dead doctor. That stopped Sedge's throat. Kramer's eyes narrowed at Wolfe. Go on. Wolfe folded his hands more tightly. Dr. Pritt's death was tidy. Too tidy. The X-ray room was clean. No struggle, no forced entry. The official story offered by convenience was sudden collapse. Gus swallowed loudly. Wolfe's eyes moved to Gus. You are the night watchman. Gus nodded quickly. Yes, sir. You work nights in Dr. Pritt's building. Yes, sir. You patrol the hallway and ignore what belongs. Gus licked his lips. Sometimes, yes. Wolfe's tone did not change. You also saw the brass nameplate removed and returned. Gus's eyes darted. I don't know nothing about no nameplate. Kramer shifted his weight. The shift had meaning. Kramer was already tired of this, Wolfe said. Do not be foolish. Your foolishness will not protect you. It will only make the outcome more unpleasant. Gus's shoulders hunched. He looked at me, then at Kramer, as if hoping one of us would offer him an exit that did not involve truth. I said, Gus, Wolfe doesn't do this for exercise. If you want to keep your job and your kneecaps, start talking. Gus swallowed again. I just did what I was told. Wolfe nodded, as if Gus had finally pronounced the correct password. Yes, You did what you were told. That is precisely why you are here. You did not steal for profit. You carried. Gus's voice cracked. It was just a plate. She said it was for cleaning, for polishing. Kramer barked. The watchman's eyes flicked to Miss Kroll and then away so fast, it might have been a reflex. Miss Kroll's expression remained calm. Her posture remained professional. Her hands stayed folded. If she had been in a waiting room, she would have looked reassuring. In Wolfe's office, reassurance is often a costume, Wolfe said. Now we discuss the missing vial. Sedge frowned. What vial? A sedative used in imaging procedures, Wolfe replied. Common in your building's diagnostic suite, Miss Kroll. Kept in controlled storage, logged, accounted for, and yet one vial was missing. Miss Kroll spoke for the first time. Voice even. Many supplies are used. A single missing vial is not unusual. Wolfe's gaze fixed on her, and it had that quiet weight that makes a room feel smaller. It is unusual when it coincides with a death in the imaging suite. It is also unusual when it is precisely the type of sedative that produces a collapse that looks natural to a hurried observer. Kramer leaned forward. We didn't find a syringe, Wolfe inclined his head. Because you did not know where to look. A sedative used in imaging can be administered without drama. A small dose in a drink, a swab, a prepared tube. You have imagination, Inspector, but it functions best when guided. Kramer grunted. Offended and interested at the same time, Wolfe turned slightly toward me. Archie, the vial. I opened the envelope on my desk and produced a clear evidence bag. Inside was a tiny empty vial with a printed label, serial numbers, and the neat handwriting of a clinic log. It looked harmless. It was not. Gus stared at it as if it were a snake. Sedge's eyes widened. Where did you get that? Wolfe said calmly. From the trash container in the clinic's imaging corridor, removed before it was emptied. It was discarded carefully, wrapped in paper towels, placed beneath clean refuse. A person who disposes of evidence neatly believes neatness is invisibility. Tessa Kroll's eyes flickered then. Just once, not panic. Calculation. Wolfe saw it. Wolfe always sees it. The serial number, Wolfe continued, matches a vial checked out under Dr. Pritt's service line. The sign-out is in your hand, Miss Kroll. Miss Kroll's voice remained steady. I sign out supplies regularly. That proves nothing. It proves access, Wolfe replied. And access is the foundation of guilt when combined with motive and method. He looked at Gus. You delivered packages for the clinic. You also delivered for a private arrangement, a side business using Dr. Pritt's respectable name as a shield. Gus's mouth opened, then shut. His fear was sweating through his suit. Sedge snapped. What side business? Wolfe's eyes moved to Sedge with mild contempt. Mr. Sedge, your concern is commendable but belated. Your building provided the corridors. Your keys provided the convenience. You did not create the rot. You merely failed to notice it because it did not stain the paint. Sedge flushed. I run a clean building. You run a building, Wolfe corrected. Cleanliness is not within your competence. Sedge looked as if he might explode, but the presence of Kramer kept him contained. Wolfe returned his attention to Tessa. Miss Kroll, you had the easiest access to sedatives. You had the easiest access to imaging rooms. You had the easiest access to Dr. Pritt's habits, his schedule, his keys, and his complacency. Tessa met Wolfe's gaze calmly. Dr. Pritt was my employer. I assisted him. You managed him, Wolfe said, and you managed his name, his office, and his weekends. There was a faint shift in the room. Gus's breathing quickened. Sedge sat more rigidly. Kramer's eyes narrowed further, the way they do when a case begins to look like it will close properly. Wolfe said, the brass nameplate was the device that linked the office, the parcels, and the clinic. Miss Kroll's lips tightened slightly. A nameplate. Yes, Wolfe replied. A respectable name can open doors, move parcels, and cover an illegal operation. A plate removed from the doctor's door and carried briefly can be presented to the right eyes as proof of authorization. A delivery man shows a brass plate, a badge of belonging, and a guard does not ask questions. The watchman spoke fast, desperate. I didn't ask what she was doing. She said if anyone noticed it missing, it was out for polishing. She said Monday morning would look normal again. Wolfe nodded. Exactly, polishing is camouflage. It implies legitimacy. It provides explanation, and after the plate had served its purpose, it was returned polished to erase the indignity of travel. Kramer's voice was sharp. What purpose? Wolfe's tone remained mild. To assert control over Dr. Pritt's identity without leaving the usual trace. The nameplate did not bypass locks. It bypassed questions, paperwork, and scrutiny. Find, Dr. Pritt discovered not merely the missing sedative, but the weekend pattern. Miss Kroll's composure held. This is creative speculation. Wolfe's eyes hardened. It is logic. Now we address motive. He leaned back slightly, and the movement had the effect of tightening a noose. Dr. Pritt discovered not merely the missing sedative, but the weekend pattern. He began to ask. He began to look at logs. He began, perhaps, to suspect that his receptionist had repurposed his respectable name and inherited brass plate to facilitate an operation that was not respectable. Miss Kroll's chin lifted. Dr. Pritt was careful. He became careful late, Wolfe said. Late enough to become dangerous to you, Kramer said. So she kills him in the X-ray room. Wolfe nodded, tidy, controlled. A small dose of sedative, a collapse that can be described as medical misfortune, and because the death occurs in the imaging suite, the tools and disposal are convenient. Sedge's voice came out hoarse. This is insane. Wolfe's gaze moved to him briefly. It is criminal. Insanity is a different category. Miss Kroll finally shifted in her chair. It was small, but it was the first crack in the stillness. She looked at Gus, and her eyes sharpened with something that was not reassurance anymore. Wolfe watched that look and spoke quietly. You used the watchman, Miss Kroll. You used him because he is pliable, and because couriers are invisible. They pass through doors and no one asks why. You told him it was a prank. You called it a favor. You paid him enough to feel important and little enough to keep him hungry. Gus whispered, I didn't know about no drugs, I swear. Wolfe nodded. I believe you. You are not capable of such discretion. Gus flinched at that, but he did not argue. Miss Kroll's voice was still controlled, but the control had strain now. You have no proof I killed him. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. You underestimate the value of small proofs, the vial, the logs, the missing sign-out, the timing, the fact that you were alone with him in the imaging suite during the final hour, the fact that you instructed Mr. Meller to borrow and return the nameplate, and the final proof, which is your behavior. My behavior, Tessa repeated. Wolfe nodded. When I mentioned the sedative, you did not express surprise. You expressed irritation. A person falsely accused is astonished. A person accurately accused is annoyed that her planning has been interpreted. Miss Kroll's eyes flashed. That is ridiculous, I said. Tessa, Wolfe doesn't gamble with adjectives. He invests in them. Kramer stepped forward slightly. Miss Kroll, we can take you in now and let you repeat that at headquarters. Miss Kroll's composure did not break into hysterics. It broke into coldness. The professional calm fell away, and what remained was a hard, tired anger. He was going to destroy everything, she said. The words came out clean, like a scalpel. He was going to call the board. He was going to call lawyers. He was going to pretend he was the victim when he had enjoyed every benefit of my work. Wolfe's voice was quiet. So you made him a victim. Her jaw clenched. He didn't ask where the extra money came from. He didn't ask why certain deliveries and parcels moved after hours under his name. He liked his name on the door. He liked the way people stepped aside for it. Wolfe's gaze remained steady until he asked for it back. That line landed in the room like a locked door clicking shut. Kramer moved. Stebbins stepped in. Tessa did not resist, but her eyes held Wolfe's as the cuffs closed. And in those eyes, I saw a last stubborn belief that she had only done what the world required. Wolfe did not grant her that comfort. As they took Miss Crow out, the watchman sagged in his chair as if his bones had been holding him up with borrowed confidence. Sedge stared at his key ring, suddenly unsure whether it was power or embarrassment. Wolfe looked at Gus. "Mr. Mellor, you will cooperate fully with the police. You will be fortunate if your punishment is limited to shame." Gus nodded rapidly, grateful for anything that was not prison. Wolfe turned to Sedge. "Mr. Sedge, you will improve your building's procedures. You will not rely on shine to substitute for scrutiny." Sedge swallowed. "Yes, Mr. Wolfe." Kramer paused at the door and looked back at Wolfe, annoyed again, because gratitude is not his native language. "You got what you wanted." "Yes," Wolfe said. Kramer grunted and left. When the house finally settled, I walked to the front hall and looked at the brass nameplate gleaming on the door. It looked respectable. It looked permanent. It looked like the kind of object that would never have anything to do with crime. A little shine can hide a lot of rot. Wolfe's voice came from the office. Calm, as always. "Archie, close the door." I did. The latch clicked. Small and final. On Riddle Street. That is how debts get paid. Not with drama, but with a quiet sound that tells you the account is closed, whether you like the balance or not.